3 out of every 4 shipping containers that land at America's biggest ports get sent right back out to sea empty. That's not a shipping error. It's the math of global trade. More goods come in from overseas than go back out, so the empty steel boxes pile up faster than anyone can move them. Ports from Los Angeles to Long Beach have run out of yard space to stack them. Meanwhile, the average American rent has doubled in the time it took most of these ports to fill up with unused steel. And a growing number of people looking for an affordable place to live have looked at that stockpile of $100 steel boxes and asked a simple question. Why does a home cost $2,000 a month when the raw shell of one is sitting unused by the thousands, 20 minutes from downtown? This video documents how people are answering that question. Not the Pinterest version, not the $2 million architect-designed container mansion on a hilltop. The version with a permit office, a structural engineer, a condensation problem nobody warns you about, and a real invoice. Right now, people are living full-time in permitted homes, built from a single steel shipping container that started its life hauling furniture, electronics, or auto parts across the Pacific. Some are off-grid homesteaders building on land they already own. Some got priced out of a starter home and ran the numbers on a container instead. Some of it is cities themselves, converting containers into supportive housing because it's faster and cheaper than framing walls with lumber. This isn't a workaround. It's legal in all 50 states. But legal and easy aren't the same word, and most videos skip the part where it gets hard. The zoning office that says no, the insulation mistake that rots a steel box from the inside out, the bank that won't mortgage a container, the wrong cut that turns a structural wall into a liability. Every one of those has a real solution. What follows is the actual build manual, including the part where you cut a window into a load-bearing wall without the house folding in on itself. 4 things stand between a shipping container and a livable home, and every one of them shows up in the comments of every container video ever posted. The first is zoning. Some counties treat a container home exactly like a stick-built house. Others won't issue a permit no matter what's on paper. The difference isn't the container, it's the zip code. The second is insulation. Steel doesn't insulate and it doesn't breathe. Get the vapor barrier wrong and the box sweats from the inside, rotting the frame where you can't see it until the floor is soft. The third is the cut. A container's strength lives almost entirely in its corrugated steel walls. Cut a window in the wrong spot without bracing it first, and you're not renovating a house. You're removing the thing holding it up. The fourth is money. Most banks won't mortgage a container, full stop. So this gets built in cash, in stages, slower than the thumbnails suggest. None of these are deal breakers. All 4 have known fixes. That's the rest of this video. Search shipping container home cost, and every thumbnail says the same thing, $5,000. That number's real, but it's the cost of the empty box before anything happens to it. A used 40-foot high cube container, the size most builders use, runs $3,000 to $5,000. That's the shell, that's it. The real number for a single container home that's insulated, wired, plumbed, permitted, and livable is closer to $40,000. Here's where it goes. The container, $4,000. Delivery and crane, $2,000. A pier foundation, $6,000. Closed cell spray foam, the only real fix for a steel box that rots from the inside if you skip it, $7,000. Engineered plans and structural sign-off, $2,000. Permits, $2,000. Electrical, plumbing, a bathroom, kitchenette, windows, and finish out, the remaining $17,000. Against a traditional home averaging $350,000 to $800,000, a finished container home at $125 to $150 a square foot is still a real discount, just not the $5,000 discount the thumbnail promised. The math still works. It's $40,000 of math, not $5,000. Steel conducts heat and cold about 500 times more aggressively than wood framing. Left. Bare, a container is a greenhouse in July and a freezer in January. That's why insulation isn't optional here. It's the entire ball game. The fix is closed. Cell spray foam applied directly to the interior steel. It carries an R value of 6 to 7 per inch, so 3 inches gets a wall to an R value of 21, solidly in code range for most US climate zones. It stops the heat transfer and seals the steel completely, which is what keeps the condensation problem, the one that rots containers from the inside, from ever starting. Structurally, almost all of a container's strength lives in its 8 corner posts, not the side walls. That's the same structure holding up a container home, which is why cutting into the walls without reinforcing the opening first is the one mistake that turns a strong house into a weak one. Done right, a container home holds up 25 to 30 years with minimal maintenance. Corten steel forms its own protective rust layer over time that shields the structure rather than weakening it. The bones are good. The execution is everything. Unlike a lot of housing crisis workarounds, this one isn't a gray area. A container home, done properly, is a fully legal, fully permitted residence in all 50 states. Nobody's hiding from an inspector. But legal everywhere hides a harder truth. It doesn't mean easy, and it doesn't mean the same everywhere. Some counties permit container homes exactly like a regular house. Others reject the application on site, not because of any law against it, but because the office has never seen one and doesn't want to be first to say yes. The difference isn't the container, it's the zip code, and almost nobody learns that until after they've bought one. That's the part most videos skip. The finished home, minus the 6 months it sat in a driveway while the owner argued with the permitting office. What follows is the real manual. Which counties say yes, how to check first, and every step after that. The biggest myth about container homes is that the container is the legal question. It isn't. The legal question is the zip code. Container homes have been approved in every US state, but approved somewhere and approved on your parcel are different facts. Agricultural zoning is generally the most forgiving. Counties treat containers as farm structures with light or no permitting, right up until you say, dwelling. The moment you intend to live in it, most counties require a residential occupancy permit no matter how the land is zoned. There's a distinction most builders learn the hard way. Zoning governs where you can build. Building code governs how. A county can have zero problem with a container structurally and still reject it because the parcel zoning doesn't allow that dwelling type at all. 2 separate approvals, 2 separate offices. Passing one says nothing about the other. There's also a trap for anyone trying to cut corners. A container permanently anchored to a foundation gets treated like any code-compliant home. Left on wheels, it gets classified as an RV, or tiny home on wheels, and most residential zones cap RV living at 14 to 30 days. Skipping the foundation to save money is the fastest way to lose your legal footing entirely. The first move, before buying anything, pull up your county's online parcel map, read the zoning code, then call the planning department and ask specifically whether prefab or modular residential structures are permitted. Container home often isn't in their vocabulary, even when the answer is yes. Rural counties across Texas, Colorado, Tennessee, and Florida have the strongest track record of approvals. Dense urban zones and neighborhoods with a homeowners association have the weakest. This failure point kills more container homes than any zoning rejection because it doesn't show up right away. It shows up 18 months in when the floor starts feeling soft. Warm, moist indoor air moves toward the container's cold steel walls and condenses on contact, same as a glass of ice water sweating, except this happens inside a wall cavity nobody's watching. If the insulation behind that wall is something like fiberglass, it soaks up the moisture, loses its value completely, and holds water directly against the steel. Rust starts, mold follows, framing rots from the inside, invisible until the damage is structural. The fix is one material, closed-cell spray foam, applied directly to bare steel before any framing goes in. It's air impermeable. It adheres to the corrugated steel and seals every gap in one continuous layer, so warm air never touches the cold steel at all. No contact, no condensation, no rot. Insulation and vapor barrier in the same step. The trade-off is space. Spray foam eats 3 to 4 inches off every wall before you've even built the stud wall for outlets and drywall. On a container that's already only 7 feet 8 inches to 8 feet 10 inches wide inside, that matters. Every experienced builder makes the same call anyway. Lose the inches, keep the house standing. Location moves this project's cost more than almost anything, starting with the container itself. Houston is the cheapest reliable market in the country, with used 20-foot units sometimes moving at depot for under $1,000. Buy the same container in Denver or Minneapolis, and you're paying $1,400 to $1,500 more before a truck moves an inch, purely from the inland haul. Buying near a port and hauling it yourself is almost always cheaper than buying from a local reseller who's baked delivery into the price. Permitting follows a completely different map, and it's the bigger swing of the two. Rural counties across Texas, Tennessee, and Colorado carry the lightest permit fees, often a few $100s in a matter of weeks. Dense urban zones and homeowner association neighborhoods carry fees in the thousands, engineering review requirements, and timelines stretching past a year. Put both together and the spread is enormous. A builder in rural Texas might get from empty land to move in for close to $30,000. The identical build in a coastal California suburb with slower permitting and pricier containers can clear $60,000 to $70,000 for the same house. A pause here, because this is the one step where a mistake doesn't cost you money. It costs you a house that can fail. A container's strength is concentrated almost entirely in its corner posts and the corrugated steel walls tied back into them. The same design that lets container ships stack these things 6 and 7 high, loaded at sea. Cutting a window or doorway into that steel without reinforcing the opening first doesn't just leave a hole. It removes structural capacity the rest of the container depended on. Nothing tells you that's happened until the roofline sags or a door stops closing right, usually long after the cut. The fix isn't optional. Every opening gets framed with structural steel tubing before the cut is finalized, sized to engineered plans, not eyeballed. Hiring a licensed structural engineer to review your cutout plan, even for one window, is worth every dollar of the $500 to $2,000 it costs. And it's usually required for permit approval anyway, so skipping it just moves the cost to a failed inspection later. This video documents a legal, permitted build process. It's not a substitute for a site-specific engineering review. If you take one thing from this video, take this. Step 1. Sourcing the container. Most single container homes use a 40-foot high cube unit, not a standard height. That extra foot matters. Once insulation and flooring eat into the interior, a standard container leaves barely 7 feet of headroom, while a high cube finishes around 8, which is what most codes actually require. On grading, as containers are cheapest and riskiest, sold with no condition guarantee. Wind and water-tight containers keep weather out, but may show wear. Cargo-worthy containers are certified structurally sound and the minimum grade most engineers will sign off on. One-trip containers cost 2 to 3 times more, but are essentially factory fresh. Buy near a port depot and arrange your own delivery rather than paying an inland reseller's markup, and confirm the container never carried hazardous cargo before buying. Step 2. The foundation. The decision that separates a legal dwelling from an RV. The container has to be permanently anchored to qualify as code-compliant housing. Pier foundations run $4,000 to $8,000 and work in most climates, pending a soil test. A full concrete perimeter runs $12,000 to $18,000, required in some jurisdictions and better for frost-heave climates. This is also where your engineer's cutout plan gets finalized, since the foundation and wall reinforcements are designed together. Step 3 is where the engineer's plan becomes steel. Before any cut, temporary bracing goes up around the intended openings to hold the wall's load while the steel is cut away with a plasma cutter or grinder. Only then does permanent reinforcement, steel, tubing, size to spec, get welded in, restoring the load path. Skipping the bracing and cutting straight through is the most common amateur mistake, and the one that can warp a container's shape before the frame ever goes in. Step 4 is insulation, and sequence matters as much as material. Closed-cell spray foam goes on the bare interior steel before any stud wall, 3 inches to an R value of 21, one continuous seal against moisture. Only after it cures does the interior 2x4 stud wall go in, slightly offset from the container wall. That wall isn't doing the insulating, it's just holding electrical, plumbing, and drywall, while the foam behind it does the real work. Step 5 is the roof. Same spray foam, plus a rigid foam board layer on the exterior steel in high sun climates, since the roof takes the most direct thermal load on the container. Step 6 is electrical and plumbing rough-in. The one stage where DIY is the wrong call, even for an experienced builder. License sign-off is required for inspection almost everywhere, and it's what your insurance will ask for later. Wiring and plumbing run through the stud wall, never against the steel directly, with the water heater and waste system sized to whatever the site has. Municipal hookup, well and septic, or a holding tank on more remote builds. Step 7 is exterior weatherproofing, a wire wheel pass and rust-inhibiting primer on the original steel, then either a marine-grade coating or full cladding like wood siding or stucco over furring strips, which also stops the finished home from reading as container from the street. Roof flashing around any penetrations and cutouts gets sealed last, since a seam failure here is the most common source of leaks that undo months of insulation work in one storm. Step 8 is interior finish. Flooring goes over a vapor barrier underlayment. Container floors are often pesticide-treated marine plywood, so this layer also seals off any off-gassing. Then drywall, cabinetry, and fixtures, like any small home. This is where the budget swings hardest. The gap between a $40,000 build and an $80,000 one is almost entirely happening here. Final inspection covers structural, electrical, plumbing, and insulation sign-off, passing all 4 converts the container from a construction project into a legally occupiable home. A failed inspection isn't the end of a build. Most experienced builders expect at least one, and it's almost always a fix, not a redo. The most common failure is insulation related, a wall assembly missing its required R value, usually from foam going in thin at a seam. The fix: add rigid foam board at the flagged spot, re-inspect, done. Rarely does it mean tearing out finished walls. The second is structural, a stamped plan not followed exactly, or a weld off spec. More expensive to fix after the fact, which is exactly why bracing before cutting matters. Cheaper to do the reinforcement right the first time than reopen a finished wall. The third is paperwork, a missing document, an expired permit. The easiest to fix, usually a resubmission and a short delay. None of these mean starting over. They mean a delay and a modest added cost. Compared to years of $2,000 a month rent versus a home that took 6 extra weeks to pass inspection, the math still holds. Everything so far describes the single container build, roughly $40,000, mostly hands-on, over months. From here there are 2 directions, depending on whether you have more time or more money. The first is scaling up. Combining 2 or 3 containers roughly doubles the complexity at every stage. Twice the structural connections, twice the systems to tie together. And cost follows, complexity more than square footage. A 2 to 3 container home typically lands between $80,000 and $250,000, still well under a comparable stick-built home, but no longer the budget build. Makes sense if you need more than 1 bedroom or want a permanent primary residence. The second is skipping the build entirely. Turnkey container home companies deliver a EDCATS factory-finished, fully fixtured unit for $50,000 to $75,000, delivery included, though site prep, foundation, and utility hookups are still on you, so the savings against DIY are smaller than they look. The real savings are time, weeks instead of months, and none of the trial and error of a first structural cut. DIY saves money and costs time and risk. Turnkey saves time and risk and costs money. Neither is a mistake. It's a personal trade, not a right or wrong one. Every container home video gets the same top-liked comment. If a $4,000 steel box with plumbing can be a real home, why does this country have a homelessness crisis at all? The numbers make it hard to dismiss. Roughly 745,000 homeless Americans on any given night. Over 15 million vacant homes sitting empty at the same time. And at the ports, 3 out of every 4 containers arriving from overseas go back empty. None of these numbers are secret. The honest answer isn't that the country can't solve this. It's that the pieces don't connect on their own. A vacant house isn't automatically available. Plenty are second homes or tied up in probate. An empty container isn't automatically housing. It takes $40,000, a friendly zoning office, and months of permitting to become one. The materials and the need are both right there. What's missing is the policy work to connect them, and that's harder than stacking steel, so people are solving it themselves, one container and one permit application at a time, in the counties that will say yes. It's not a fix for the underlying math. It's what filling the gap looks like when nobody else is going to do it for you. If this saved you 6 months of guesswork, subscribe. We document the builds nobody's showing you the real numbers on. 3 out of 4 containers hitting our ports go back empty. Some of them aren't going back anymore. They're becoming homes. That's the video. Go build something.